Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Massare, here with Mike Bundt. Great show topic for today. Day 2 special means we're just going to break down all of the great day 2 gems that we have in mind. Why the day 2? Well, our show happens to be on Fridays, as you guys all well and know, and day 2 falls on the Friday of 2 weeks from today. So we wanted to do a 14-day special. Next week, we have Kent from Raz coming in as we've kind of prepped for the last couple of weeks now to let you guys know. So that's going to be a fun edition. He's going to break in his favorite prospects. He's going to talk about some Bills past history with the Raz. And he's going to talk about any questions that you guys might have about certain prospects or like what you're looking for out there. All that said and done, Mike, how are you today?
Doing great. It's Easter weekend. My parents are up from Florida, so it's going to be a fun couple days. And as always, enjoy talking Bills football and can't wait to talk about some of these day 2 prospects that you and I both are very interested in.
Yeah, for sure. Up from Florida, huh? So they are they snowbirds down there?
Yeah, they're definitely snowbirds. They avoid
Gotcha.
the cold. They got a condo down in Sarasota a couple years ago, and once it hits January, once Christmas is over with, they bolt back down, and I don't see them until it gets warm here again. So they'll be here for a couple days and then be back in the summer.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Well, what a great, once again, I hope everybody enjoys a safe and have a happy enjoying the holiday if you celebrate. Mike, here with you, though, we have some lot of things to talk about. I hope everybody enjoyed their day today, but it's a Friday and we got to get into it. We got to get into your favorite day 2 prospects. We've kind of talked about the offense. Then we talked about the defense. We need to kind of sum it all up for everybody as we get into our Raz special next week. So let's start there, Mike. Who, after all is said and done, I know it kind of will hinge on the first round a lot, and that's what makes this a fun show because we have a lot of avenues to talk about. Whereas the first round, you're only thinking about the first 24 picks before you. So this day 2 special has a lot to do with your own opinion. So I'm going to leave it there, Mike. Tell me first and foremost. I want to start at the receiver room. I think you have some guys jotted down. I want to hear from you on who your favorite day 2 receiver will be for the Buffalo Bills and why.
So obviously there's a lot of guys to choose from. I think at this point, my favorite day 2 guy is Skye Moore because you and I have both seen him first and foremost when he's going up against UB at Western Michigan. The guy has speed, good ball skills, has the ability to elude tacklers, had I believe 30 broken tackles last year, forced 30 broken tackles last year. So he's a guy that has crazy ability, did it in the MAC, but I really think he's a guy that has some potential to be special at the next level. He'll never be a star, but I think he's a guy that could be a quality player and really be productive if he was in the right situation.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a guy that, I would say probably the best player in the MAC. At least this season, I think he brings a lot to the table. He's always on a competitive roster. I know, although it is the MAC in football, the MAC is a little bit better, obviously, than other sports where it is one of the main mid-major conferences and has produced some good talent, Skye Moore being one of them. Is there something specific you like about him? Do you think he just does everything well? Like, what's your total overall opinion? You think he can play multiple positions? You think he can come and get some snaps immediately in this Bills offense?
I mean, he could. Obviously, the Bills have some depth at wide receiver. The top 3 spots are already taken, and then you have Isaiah McKenzie in kind of a gadget role. So I would see Skye Moore as more of a 4, as their 4-man early on. So he probably wouldn't have a great impact right away as a rookie, but I definitely see him carving out a role in the future, especially since you don't know the long-term depth at wide receiver behind Stefan Diggs. You really don't know. Gabe Davis has 2 more years, but that's really all you have as a guarantee. I like that he has the ability to break tackles, that he's elusive. He's not the best separator, but he does have speed. We saw his 40 time. Obviously, that's not the only indicator of if you're going to have that elite acceleration at the next level, but he has a couple good traits. He's kind of becoming I'm trying to think, the guy that a lot of people are getting behind. People are saying, oh, look at this underrated prospect. Well, he's getting to the point where he's not really underrated anymore because everybody seems to be talking him up. But if you're going to take a shot at a guy day 2, he's just as good as a handful of other guys that you could look at. Obviously, some people are going to be fans of George Pickens from Georgia. You're going to see some people hoping that a Kelvin Austin might have that high upside out of Memphis, and Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati, John Mechie III from Alabama. So there's a handful of guys that all bring things to the table, but I think Skye Moore has a little bit higher upside than the rest of those other guys, at least from what we're talking about pre-draft.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a human highlight reel, Skye Moore is. Like, he really is. Like, and I once again will continue to preface it by the ability in the MAC, but we kind of think highly of the MAC here on the Going Deep podcast. Like, we don't dog the MAC. We think that there is some solid, talented players that have come out of there. The conference overall talent in the NFL is pretty decent, and quite frankly, it's a decent football division. There really is some good games in there. They have their own their own weekday action called Maction, and it really does bring some really good football. Skye Moore is just a human highlight reel in that conference. Really, I think he translates to the slot position based on what I have seen and what I've seen in person, and also what I've seen just in his film. I think he's a slot receiver. That doesn't mean he might not have a little bit of that versatility to pop outside, but I just do think that height would kind of restrict him there. But I don't know. I think the Bills are kind of looking for that slot replacement potentially.
And that's a good spot for him. You think about it. You got Jamison Crowder. That's probably not a long-term thing for the Bills. So why not get a guy in the second round that you can groom and be ready to take over on a cheap, manageable contract after a year? You let Jamison Crowder do his thing in the next season, depending on what he wants to do. If he wants to resign, cool. If not, you have another guy ready to step up. So I think it's a perfect fit. And like you said, the MAC has a lot of quality players. Just you and I, from all of our years watching UB football, sure, the program hasn't been great, but we could have an entire show just on the players that have come out of UB. And Western Michigan is one of the elite programs in the MAC over the last decade, and they've had a lot of good players that have gone to the next level. So if you are going to get a wideout from a Mid-American Conference school, getting more out of Western Michigan is definitely one that would have a lot more upside than most.
And you like the production, 94 catches, 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns. I mean, his production's there. The number one thing not talked really about him is his IQ, and I think that's what the Bills will like. The Bills are very interested in him, and I think that IQ comes out. It's not just the production. It's not just the numbers. It's not just the slot ability to me. It's his production mixed with that IQ. Like, he has a high football IQ. He's been talked about pretty heavily within football rooms. So I think that will translate, and that's what the Bills are looking for. Like, does he have the smarts, does the IQ to continue to participate in this offense? That's, quite frankly, you need to build that IQ and you need to build that rapport with Josh Allen. So I think that IQ immediately in the receiver rooms, as well as working with Josh, could really translate for the Bills. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. A high IQ does matter in terms of high football IQ, and Skye Moore has it. I think he's just a football player, and I think that he'd be an immediate impact to the Bills from day one. He's been that productive, and I don't just take that lightly. I do think he has been, if not one of the best player in the MAC. So I like that, and I like his ability to really help give Josh Allen yet another weapon. As we talked about 2 weeks ago here, Mike, on the offensive side of the ball, give Josh Allen weapons. It's that straight up. It's that simple. Team's ready to win now. And quite frankly, when I'm looking at day two prospects, I'm looking for who has the biggest ability to play day one for a roster that's ready to win now. Might be a hard feat. You might be looking at some of that controllable asset, but I think you get both in a Skye Moore at a position that we've mentioned many times now is the most important position in the sport beside quarterback. It's receiver. Look at these contracts. It's ruining teams. Green Bay doesn't know what to do. KC had to get rid of one. The Bills luckily held on to theirs. But I mean, it is a really important position. And I think Skye Moore would be somebody that could come in and be an immediate impact day one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I feel about him.
Yeah. And this draft, overall, there's not a really huge group of number one guys at wide receiver in this draft, but there's a ton of guys that you look at could be a solid two or a solid slot guy. And when you look at the wide receiver position, there's a bunch of guys in the second, third round that definitely can bring some ability to the table. The question is, are some of these guys that we project in the first round, are any of them going to possibly fall to the second round? You hear names like Dotson, you hear Christian Watson. Are guys like that, are they going to still go late first round. Could some of them fall in the second round? I wouldn't predict it, but possibility. A guy like I know I mentioned Pickens earlier, but before he had his ACL injury, he might have been a guy that could have been considered a first round talent for a while. Mechie had all the stats in Alabama, but he lacked some of the explosiveness. So you're talking about a guy who had 96 receptions, over 1,000 yards at Alabama. Normally, a guy like that, you're thinking first round talent, but obviously he's coming off an ACL injury as well. And then Kelvin Austin, you hear everybody call him the next Tyreek Hill. Well, he's far from that, but he is a guy that has some nice attributes. It's funny, I saw a comparison that actually said he's the next Isaiah McKenzie. So not that that's a bad thing, but I mean, still, if you could get a younger guy, maybe in the third round, if you're getting the next Isaiah McKenzie, I mean, that could actually be something that you could mold into something decent as well. So a lot of these guys you're hearing about have the ability of Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama. He's a name that you're going to hear a lot in that late second round, maybe early third round time frame. So there's a bunch of guys out there at wide receiver. We could pick a million of them and go over them all. But yeah, at this time, Skye Moore is my favorite of that group. But if a guy like Watson or Dotson fall down, then I have another answer. So.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, once again, what makes the day two special fun is because there is a little bit of that draft ability in terms of where are they going to go? Like at what point is that player going to go? And I think that's what makes day two so much fun is that are you looking at high risers? Are you looking at fallers? What are you looking at in that day two? Like, it's hard to predict. It's really hard to predict. The first round's already hard enough. Like it's really hard to predict the first round. And then it gets a little bit harder and a little bit harder, but that's what makes day two fun because we could be sitting here talking about Skye Moore. The next thing we know, the Bills really like Skye Moore and he's their first round pick because for some reason, that's where they put him on the board. That's where he graded out to the NFL teams and not draft sites and our film knowledge and what we think. It doesn't matter. It matters what the Bills think. And, we could be talking about Skye Moore like pretty happily here in the second round. And the next thing you know, he jumps up into the first round due to that high IQ, due to that big playability, due to that slot potential. So I think that's to be noted. Like that's what makes day two so much fun. And I think why round two, round three specifically are a lot of fun. Because we're hoping that players fall. We're like, that guy was a first round talent. Like now I want him a little bit more. But Mike, you hit it on the head. Like what of those guys could fall into that second round? And would the Bills maybe jump up to get them? And I think that Skye Moore could be in that range of like, they're not 100% sure he's going to be there in the second round. So do they have to finagle a little bit to move up into that middle to the higher second round potential? Or for somebody else that they like that you mentioned maybe falling. So Kelvin, to me, Kelvin Austin's a fun player. Like I think that he did all of the right things in Raz. We're going to bring him up next week, everybody. So he's definitely, one of the players that will be in the Raz special next week, just due to some of those numbers. But he would bring that returnability and somebody that he kind of mimics or plays like is a Jakeem Grant. Like that's interesting to me because now you bring that dynamic. Speed kills, and then you bring the dynamic of bringing that returnability. Mike, is that going to be important enough to this roster where they were looking for that at points last year to maybe trump a Skye Moore? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so my main thing, me personally, if I'm going to go wide receiver, I'm more of a fan of going wide out at 25 or trying to get one of the higher prospects, to be honest with you. I like the one comment that Jason had. I showed it earlier, but I'll put it up again. The Bills need a receiver in this draft that can take the top off the defense. That's really where I'm sitting at too. I would definitely prefer an Olave, a Williams. I just can't. Olave is probably the only one of those two that I could potentially see dropping, but I don't think the odds of the Bills getting one of those two guys is that high as we get closer to the draft. I would love to have a burner. It's just it's a tough situation because it really all depends on how the first round plays out. If the Bills go corner in the first round, I don't know if any of these guys are going to be that special wide receiver that the Bills need to get to that next dynamic. Then you're looking for certain attributes. You're looking down the line where they can fit with this team. It's all based on how it plays out in round one. So there's so much uncertainty, but those are definitely the guys that I would mention if they are to go someone in the second, third round.
Okay. I think it's fun for purposes of the day 2 special. Let's assume the Bills go elsewhere than the position group we're talking about. So obviously it's still possible they would double down at a position unit. I mean, cornerback being the one that would jump out to you at like the double down potential, but really who's stopping them from doubling down really anywhere? Like really none of the positions would shock me other than like quarterback, like nothing else would shock me. So they could really double down. Running back might get a little weird. I don't think they would double down there, but offensive line, they could double down.
That really will factor in here because
yeah,
do the Bills want one of those running backs at 57? If you're looking at a Kenneth Walker, a lot of people think that Breece Hall might drop a little bit. So is there a potential Breece Hall goes somewhere in the second round? Maybe you have a situation where you're not in love with the guys at 25. Maybe you trade down, try to also get your 57 up a little bit higher. There's a lot of different ways you could work it out. We've been saying for the last month or so, we think the Bills are going to want a combination of wide out, corner, running back in the top 3 rounds. So it could play out a lot of different ways.
Sure.
Yeah. So it really just depends what they're targeting. We obviously talked about all the first round corners that we think are some targets, but there's a lot of good second round corners and third round guys too. So I don't know if they're going to double down on any of these positions, but if they did, I think corner would be that spot.
Yeah, so I think for then, that's purposes of the day 2 special, I'm kind of working in the guise of a non-double down just for 1 and 2, rounds 1 and 2. So whether they double down with a 4th or a 5th or a 6th, okay, sure, maybe. But in purposes of this, we're going to talk about a non-double down here. So I guess we're looking at the pick. It's the second round starts today, 2 weeks from today. It's 8:00. It begins, and the Bills are trade up or they're going to stay put. So I guess that's like the best way that we're kind of going to do the show is, kind of bring some names that, so if we're talking about running back, then we're going to assume they didn't take a running back. If we're talking about receiver, we're going to assume they didn't take a receiver. If they're talking about corner, we're going to assume they didn't take a corner. So, kind of wrapping up the receiver room though, one thing I wanted to bring up about Skye Moore that I had jotted down in my notes, a couple of statistics, and I want to talk to Kent next week about his RAS being a little bit lower, like it was a little bit more average. Some of the numbers cast out that why the height and weight right there is going to ding you with RAS, like the athletic profile right there is going to ding you. But is that enough for you to knock the player? That's up to the Bills and other teams, scouting staffs. But things that do stick out to you: hand size, 94th percentile, 10-yard split, 97th percentile, 40-yard dash, 82nd percentile, broad jump, 77th percentile. Do you know who he's the most similar to? So he's the most similar to a bunch of receivers in this draft based on his athletic profile. Velus Jones, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, some of those names he actually compares pretty nicely to based on his metrics. But the most of the current NFL player, do you know, Mike? Would you have a guess who he compares to?
I wouldn't off the top of my head.
I wouldn't expect you. Stefan Diggs is actually the most similar player that he has to his athletic and overall profile. That's a very interesting comparison for the Bills. And I would doubt if they didn't see that within some of their numbers and testing metrics. Obviously, Stefan went in day 3, but that doesn't mean that scouting can be a little better. Maybe there's some things that Skye Moore did a little bit better to bump him to the second round in college. But that's a really interesting comparison. And Greg asked earlier, could he play outside? Well, I don't know or believe he can, but why not? 5'10", he does have some of the same athletic profile. He does do some things really well. Those hands are great. He's got that 10-yard split. That means he can kind of free himself at the line. I don't know. I think it's very possible he could be a receiver too and play outside. But to me, Mike, I thought that was a really interesting profile to bring up just due to the comparison and how good that side of his athleticism is. You mix in that football IQ, and man, I think that develops a really good player in a pass-happy offense like the Bills. I think that immediately you could see that production out of him. So Skye Moore, obviously one of the focal points of our show for the day 2 special, but I think Mike and I both agree that if they don't go receiver in the first round, he would be somebody that I'm watching closely on my draft board and getting a little antsy if I feel like he could go early in the second round, because there's been, quite frankly, some rumblings that he's rising. I can't
see him going 57.
Yeah, I really can't either. I have him on based on what I've been charting and kind of moving things around and using other sites if I need to. But I mean, I have him overall kind of sitting at in the 40s. So that's what's scary to me. Like, is he going to be pushed up to 25? I don't know. But is he going to be there, like you said, at 57? I really don't feel like he is. I think he's an early 40s guy. And for the reasons, athletic profile, that IQ, all those reasons make a player like not be there at 57. So to me, I think it's a no-brainer pick if they didn't go receiver and they stay put and he's there. I mean, quite frankly, I'm probably looking through my notes saying he's my guy. Like, he's who I want to go with. So Skye Moore aside, let's kind of wrap up the receiver room here, Mike. If he's gone and the Bills just did something else at 25 and he does go late 30s, early 40s, and they just couldn't get him, what were you thinking of that? Now you don't have now he's gone and you didn't draft one in the first. What are you thinking? But let's say the Bills are still thinking that I need to put a receiver in this room.
If they feel like they need a receiver still in the room, I don't know if you're going to have the perfect guy that you're looking for, a speed guy, or you're looking for a burner. You have a bunch of guys that bring different things to the table. I would say, me personally, that I would be in favor of. I want to see what Pickens can do out of Georgia, just because he's a high-end guy. He's known for being a little bit of a trash talker, getting in some arguments with corners, but really didn't have much time at all last year, coming off an ACL injury. But he's a guy that people were very high on heading into his later years before his injury. So he's a guy I'd definitely be kind of intrigued by. And then Kelvin Austin, obviously there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of love for him, but he's a guy that brings something to the table. You don't really know what it'll be. It's a little bit of a risk, but because of his size, but he has that speed, elusive. And even if he ended up being more of an Isaiah McKenzie than a Tyreek Hill, you're still getting a guy that can be a productive NFL player, which isn't a guarantee once you get to the third round and beyond. You want to hit on players at that point, but it's not always a guarantee, especially on a roster like the Bills, where you have so few holes. Sometimes in the third round, you're just trying to get a guy that will at least contribute and not sit on the bench, barely getting any playing time. So,
gotcha. Yeah. To answer this question, I do believe the Bills want an indication that they'll play more tight end sense. I think that you don't pay a tight end even like OJ Howard with the potential to be a good blocker to sit on the bench. I do believe he's there for injury protection for Dawson Knox, and he's also there for many 2 tight end sets. So I do believe that you'll see that more. It could alter a little bit of the plans, but I still think the Bills really feel like, with the potential emergence of Gabriel Davis and he already being halfway through that rookie contract, that they feel like, A, they throw the ball a lot. B, if they really, that's the room, like we talk about all the time, like what if Poyer goes down? What if, something happens to Edmonds or whatever? The receiver room's really important to this team because that's what makes, those are Josh Allen's number one weapons. Like, it's really important. So, like, it's not just like, oh, it'd be nice to have a controllable asset. Oh, it'd be nice if X player went down. Like, X player can go down at any position group. And are you going to have a Stefan Diggs behind a Stefan Diggs? It's like, or Dawson, or even Dawson Knox behind Dawson Knox, or Deion Dawkins behind Deion Dawkins. Like, no, like I don't know how any team really would have that kind of ability. But if you do, I think for the Bills, the receiver room is the most important, to put a controllable asset, to put a talented player, and the amount that he can still play even if the team's healthy. I think those things connect to me. And that's why I do believe receiver is an important group, even with the 2 tight end sets. And I think the 2 tight end sets are going to help the running game more than the passing game.
I'm intrigued by that. I'm intrigued by the 2 tight end sets. And there's actually a prospect that has caught both of our eyes as a developmental guy. And I think you know who I'm talking about right now, but we're both high on Coastal Carolina tight end Isaiah Likely. I saw him in person this past year, taking on the UB Bulls. And don't think that I'm just hyping him up because
all we scout is UB's roster, Mike.
Because literally everybody can smoke UB. But he played on a very good Chanticleer's team that has done very well in the Sun Belt the past 2 years. He's a good blocker. He showed that ability in the off-season stuff going on, and he has some ability as a pass-catching tight end. So he's kind of a multifaceted tight end that I really think if you can get him in the later rounds, maybe fourth, fifth round, I don't know exactly where he's going to end up. That's I wouldn't say a sleeper because he's starting to get a little bit of hype behind his name, but that's a guy that I would like on this Bills roster as a developmental guy down the line.
And it's on good authority that the Bills like him. Like I mean, I really do. I think that there's some things there that I think the Bills would love to add a tight end to the room. Dawson Knox's contract's expiring. OJ Howard signed for 1 year. So if you really want to talk about like position groups that need a player, it still is that tight end room. So if you're in that,
I would be so in favor of that. That would be one of my favorite moves that they could make in the mid rounds.
And if you're a believer that the 2 tight end system works, you definitely would need a third. Like you need a third for an injury, for any COVID or sickness related stuff, for just in general. Like a third tight end is pretty important now. And the Bills might only have 2 active tight ends and then Reggie Gilliam anyways on game day, and sometimes just one in Reggie. So like I do believe.
And why not? Why not get the added versatility? Yeah. I get some arguments with people where they during the offseason when I was advocating for Rob Gronkowski long before we knew Brady was coming back to Tampa, I said that I would have liked the Bills to pursue Gronk as a 2 tight end option, and a lot of people were telling me, well, the Bills barely use their tight ends. They only dress 1 tight end for all these games. I'm like, cool. Like, so that's what they did last year. There's no reason why you can't add that element to your team and have more flexibility. I love when the Bills have 5 wide, 4 wide, 3 wide, but I also would love to have 2 pass catching tight ends in the red zone who bring another element while also being able to run the ball. Just because the Bills pass doesn't mean that you don't want to be able to run in the red zone and also have 2 guys that can be legitimate threats. So I'm always open to whatever makes this team deeper and more dangerous. And I think the more flexibility you have, the more dangerous you are.
Yeah, and Likely does a lot of things well. Like he can play in the slot. He's a premier pass catcher. He's been used to high flying offenses. He's strong. He rips DBs. Like he's somebody that you'd want blocking other DBs, get into the safety level. He can work his way up there pretty quickly. He's a player that, quite frankly, is who you're looking for in the 3rd and 4th round. So he just fits the day 2 special, but I do believe he has enough asset and enough receiving ability that he is going to fit in the day 2 special, because I certainly don't think he's going to be there as Saturday rings around. I think he is a 3rd round pick. And I think that that's about the Bills could see value in that unit, because quite frankly, they need to keep adding depth and talent to the tight end position, and guys that can do everything, and Likely can. So like, I'm really interested to see. Bills have been interested in him. They've done some stuff with him in the offseason. So I think that quite frankly, he could be that next level. And I think he brings another dynamic that Tommy Sweeney does. And I mean, I've seen some Tommy Sweeney stuff and I like his story. And I think he's a depth piece, can play little teams, can do a little bit of, he does a little bit, but yeah, I mean, he struggled at times. And to me, Tommy Sweeney is a 4th tight end. He's a guy that barely fits on the roster. I think you'd like to have him as one of your top practice squad guys this year. But you would really like to have a room of OJ Howard with Dawson Knox and Isaiah Likely. And I think the Bills would agree. I don't think that they look at that like a luxury. I think they look at that like when you're getting into the third round for this discussion, someone like Likely adds a lot to the room, and a player that can do a little bit of everything for you. And that's kind of what you're looking for when you're picking in the 80s. We're not talking about 25 here. We're talking about maybe one of the last guys that you can get some good value out of.
Yeah, and if you're talking best player available and potential upside, and
such an athlete
fit in with the team going forward, assuming that OJ Howard uses this as a show off, cash in type year, there would be a spot for him to be tight end too, going into next year, assuming that Howard moved on and Likely developed. So that's my late 3rd round sleeper, but he could obviously maybe go even a little bit later, depending on the situation that happens there. And we're not saying it has to be a tight end at the 3rd round. I think you and I both have a bunch of other guys that we
I wanted to
going to, but it is a unique possibility, I guess.
Yeah, and I wanted to wrap up. You brought up one of my favorite targets in the 2nd round, and that's Pickens. Like, I think he's a really good target. Talk about more realistic options. Like Skye Moore's realistic, but I think Pickens is even more realistic in terms of what he's able to do as a receiver too at 57. Kind of compares to like a Devontae Parker, that 6'3", 200 frame. He does a little bit of everything right. One of his biggest comparisons based on his mock draftable profile is CeeDee Lamb. So he does a little bit of everything right and has played at a high level at Georgia, and he can bring a little bit of everything to the game. He's a guy I really like if you need, like we talked about, if you needed to add a weapon to this team and you're sitting there, I think Pickens is a pretty good addition if you weren't able to make a move. And he's a good addition without needing to waste another asset. He's somebody that should be there at 57. I have him jotted down, literally 57th. So you're getting the right value. And I think that Pickens, to me, is a guy that can do a little bit of everything. He's been uber productive at times. Did hurt his knee, which is a little bit concerning. The Bills have a great rehab facility. They've gotten the most in those situations. So I think he has a long-term receiver 2 potential. And it's just another guy you can add.
I don't worry about the ACL injuries as much as everyone else. With these medical rooms right now, players are coming back at quicker rates than ever before. They know how to take care of these rehab. You might lose a little bit of that burst, but you can still be a highly productive player after having an ACL injury. It's not the 90s anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. And he's had plenty of time, should be ready to go. So just at 57, you're looking for that long-term potential. He was a top 10 recruit out of college or out of high school. So, I mean, he's a guy that's been uber talented. He has that talent. And quite frankly, if he didn't see that knee injury, we might be talking about him as a top 20 guy. So kind of slept on a little bit. And that's what you're looking for, that talented player there at 57. So, we'll kind of round out the offense a little bit here. I do like Kelvin Austin. I think that he could bring a lot on day 2, especially if you do miss out on some of those other names. I think that he can bring a lot to the table from the return standpoint. I like that. The Bills were missing a returner. So then you can say, well, he does add a game day roster spot because he's able to do that. So that could be interesting to the Bills to be active on day 1. Once you're drafted, you bring something to the table. That speed and that returnability gets you on the active game day roster. That's encouraging. So that could be a route that they go with. The best returner that can play receiver. I tend to look at it the best receiver that can play that can also return. But we'll see what the Bills kind of think of that. When Sanders, so Emmanuel Sanders is a good point. Like, there were snaps there to be had. The Bills bring back everybody else. They swap out Cole with Jamison Crowder, but there is those even Sanders snaps later in the season where, to me, I think the Bills offense did move better without him, with more snaps to Gabriel Davis, mixing and matching some other things. So I think that's very, very, very true statement. And I think that even plugging in a more talented receiver, even with his first year snaps, that could come in and take them and then take over the slot position, like Skye Moore, like Pickens, like a couple of other guys. I think that's very valuable to the Bills to have that kind of incredible depth at the receiver position. I just think that it's a position that you can have 5 active game day spots on it. And then maybe even a 6th with Jake Kumaro if you need a special teamer. Like, I just think that there's too much talent that you want. You want the best 4 or 5 receivers that you can possibly build for the best pass offense in the league. So,
as our show said 2 weeks ago, never too many weapons.
Too many weapons.
And they did get better when Sanders saw his playing time decline, but I think there was multiple factors. I don't think that was a simple Sanders isn't playing as much and suddenly the offense is taking off. I think what you saw in the middle of the season was an offense that, when I say struggle, I'm not saying they were playing like a bottom 10 offense, but you saw an offense that was struggling to pass protect, couldn't really run against lighter boxes. And you saw McDermott essentially get at the one point, basically tell the team, we're going to have to carve out an ability to run the ball. The Bills started getting a little bit more physical. They started committing a little bit more to the run. They were never going to be a run first team or a run heavy team, but they started becoming efficient and effective enough with the run that teams had to adapt to what they were facing. And then you also saw the emergence of Gabe Davis with his increased time. Davis went off, just an unbelievable second half of the season, combining with his playoff performance, and they really took off. That's why I keep saying on the show, I'm cool with the Bills doing some 2 tight end sets and continuing to maybe add another running back that adds another dimension, because I don't think you can ever have too many weapons. You just have to figure out how you're going to use your different assets on offense. Maybe you don't have Stefan Diggs get 120 catches a year. Maybe his number goes down and you give some of his touches to someone else. And it's not to say that you're trying to reduce the impact certain players make. You're just trying to spread the wealth, and that makes you a more dangerous unit because teams can't just single out one dimension of your offense and stop you. That makes you even that much tougher to defend. So I'm always going to be on the side. You can never have too many. Just keep on adding. And
Yeah.
That's not to say like you ignore the defense, continue to address needs and everything like that. But the Bills are lucky that they're one of the teams with the fewest needs in the NFL. So they can really attack this any way they want outside of we know they need a corner at some point early.
Yeah, and Christian Watson was the last name here I wanted to round out the receiver room with. He is a guy that's a RAS darling, like where he's definitely on the topic of conversation next week, like a 9.96 RAS, something that's super high. Great returner, definitely a day one returner for somebody. I think he was the best in FCS, if I'm not mistaken, one of the best returners in the draft. You wouldn't ever think that, but absolutely is in the cards with that second round spot. Like I don't. Little bit of worry that people are like, well, is he a first round pick? I think that he is definitely in the top 4. Like he is in the top 40s. Like I don't think he would be there at your second round picks. You have to maybe trade an asset to get up and get him if you do deem him the right fit. But that profile, man, that athletic profile is just uncanny. Plus, you add in the return ability there. Does that trump over a guy like Skye? It's very possible. So to me, I think he adds a lot. Does that FCS translate? We'll have to see, but I do believe that he is definitely a very intriguing prospect here for the day 2 special to talk about as somebody that can do a lot of things right, Mike. So, you know,
absolutely.
We're firm believers of, don't knock somebody for their competition. Definitely. That's definitely what I feel. And then that returnability alone and that athletic profile, I think there's a couple of good flags there.
Never knock someone for the competition they're playing in, but realize that if you're playing in that lower level of competition, you need to be that much more dominant against that competition. So if you're playing FCS ball, that doesn't mean you can't be a top 30 prospect. It just means you better be killing the guys you're facing if you are going to be a top 30 prospect. So that's my view on it. You've seen guys at even lower levels be productive NFL players. So doesn't mean you can't. Just means you haven't had the chance to really prove yourself against that higher level competition.
Kick returner day 1, deep threat day 1 could be two needs the Bills fill day 1 with a second round pick. So definitely a guy that's high on the list. Real quick, read his measurables: 6'4", 208, 94th percentile. 10-inch hands, 91st percentile, 1.46 split, 97th percentile, 4.36 40 is in the 91st percentile. Broad and vertical jumps also in the 98th percentile on the broad jump and the 84th percent on the vertical jump. Can pretty much do everything in his athletic profile. So that's definitely what you're looking for. And the Bills like that, I could definitely see them checking a couple of ticks with a guy like him. So I do think there's a little bit less risk if he does fall to 57 than either taking him at 25 or needing to trade up. So I think as that comes around and maybe Pickens is gone, Skye Moore is gone, if that's the case, if those two are gone, then somebody like Watson's probably available. And in that case, I do think that he becomes pretty likely. So we kind of talked about 2 tight end sets. We talked about tight end a tiny bit with likely, but let's talk about running back, Mike. Let's talk about running back. Let's assume no first round running back. They went corner round 1, or now let's assume they found an Olave that dropped at the running back position. How are you feeling sitting there at 57 or needing to trade up and knowing that top guy or two still there? What are you thinking about?
I think 57 could be the perfect spot to grab a solid running back. Obviously, you never know. It seems like now there's always that one late first round guy, and then there's a couple guys that people think could go early second round that could potentially fall. Right now, Breece Hall is the consensus number 1 for most people. Breece Hall is probably going to go somewhere late first, early second. But behind him, you got a bunch of different guys that I think could be in play on day 2. I think Kenneth Walker, the third from Michigan State, is a very strong possibility if he can fall to 57. Guy's a bulldozer, adds another dimension. Really don't know much about what he would bring to the passing game just due to the offense he was in at Michigan State. Really didn't get the opportunity to really be much of a receiver. But he's a guy that I think is an exciting prospect. Could have 2 running, obviously have him and Singletary as 1A, 1B. Other guys that you're going to hear mentioned a lot, Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M. The Bills are supposedly a big fan of his game. He's a little bit on the slower side, but good eyes, good vision. And then Pierre Strong Jr. out of South Dakota State. That seems to be the darling of the draft right now. A lot of people think he could really have a decent NFL career, have nice attributes to the table. So those are the three guys I think that most fans would be talking about. James Cook out of Georgia, another guy, but he might be a little bit later. He might be an early day 3 guy, depending on where he falls. But I would say those would be the 3 I'd be targeting in the second, third round. Would be a combination of Walker, Spiller, Strong. Obviously, depending on how much you like them, some might fall more than others, but Walker is definitely the leader in the bunch if Hall goes in the first round.
Yeah, then that's the one I have jotted down here, and I think that I'm pretty much rooting for it until he goes is Breece Hall. Like, he is the Jonathan Taylor.
Obviously Breece Hall is the guy.
Yeah.
Like, that's if you pick one, you want Breece Hall. But if you're picking 57, assuming no trade up,
right,
it's going to be Walker most likely.
And I'm thinking trade up. So for the day 2 special, guess what? Pick 38 still falls within the day 2 special. I'm thinking a trade up would definitely be necessary. And I think the Bills have to, especially if they went corner round 1 over everything. And they did take one of the guys like Booth that we talked about in the last show, or that, for purposes of this discussion, someone else fell to the cornerback spot. That the Bills actually felt like they needed, and they're sitting there like, all right, Breece Hall's our target. Like, we need to add Breece Hall to this 2 tight end set. He's the missing link, the Jonathan Taylor type of player, the Nick Chubb ability, does a lot of things well. I mean, to me, Breece Hall is just the player that could take the Bills offense to the next level. So I'm rooting for him in my day 2 special until he's gone. If he starts even in day 2, I think the Bills he is still a potential candidate as much as we love it or hate it. He is a candidate based on the board for the Bills in the first round. Like, he just straight up is. He's a candidate there. I think the Bills could think that he could. They don't, like you said, he's not going to be there 57. So they might have to think about him at 25, or at least a little bit of a trade back, get a little bit more value. Now, when I talk about trade back, I'm not talking about trade back in the sense of roster, get a million spots. We need to add all these Dick Duran players to these Dick Duran teams. I'm talking about trade back to grab an asset and then be able to come back up, draft the running back in the high 30s, and then be able to come back up, secure a receiver, secure a corner, whatever you want to do. Definitely not to stockpile an extra 3rd or 4th round pick. That's not quite what I'm after. I do believe that the Bills would then use that to come back up. So I think it would be a trade back and then a trade back up to grab 2 medium to high level 2nd round picks. That's kind of what I would be thinking in a trade scenario. If they ever acquired a pick here, I don't believe they stockpile late 3rd round picks. I just don't. I just don't think that this roster is going to be the roster that they do that with. But Breece Hall to me is a very intriguing prospect, and trading up for Breece Hall would be in the 2nd round. That wouldn't be something you would do to the 20s. These guys go in the 40s, guys. Like, I hate to admit it, and they're the best running backs in the league. The Nick Chubbs, the Jonathan Taylors, like these guys. That's just where they get picked, and it is the sweet spot for running back because all of these 1st round talented guys, no one's taking them anymore in the 20s. So if the Bills have to get ahead of it, they might have to take it at 25. Like, it's just kind of how it works. And if they don't want to get ahead of it, they can take that corner. And then as day 2 starts, the Bills are probably working the phones, because if they can add a premier running back, if the Bills offense added Jonathan Taylor tomorrow, Mike, how good would it have been last season? Do they win it all?
It would have been amazing. And Jonathan Taylor,
did they win it all?
Jonathan Taylor was a guy I wanted badly.
And they did too.
That kind of stinks. And you look at, obviously you said trade up in the 2nd round. You could look at it as maybe you trade back from the 1st round and
sure.
do that instead. You say trade down, it sounds a lot better than trade up.
Yeah,
but
it's the same thing.
Just a matter of semantics. And maybe you have your corner that you like early in the 2nd round. You toss in your number 57, and then you get something two picks in the 30s instead of 25 and 57. You make something happen like that, and you still get your corner, you get your running back, and you move forward from there. But there's a lot of different ways they can obviously figure that out. A guy like Breece Hall just changes this offense. And I do respect the point that Jessica made, that the coaching staff thinks the issue was the offensive line last year. And I honestly would agree with that. I think the issue was the offensive line last year. Not saying that they were bad. They're not a bad offensive line, but they do have some struggles with run blocking. They weren't really effective against lighter boxes last year. So maybe that's a little bit on the line combination, a little bit on Singletary and Moss. I think it's obvious from how they have attacked the offseason that the Bills do think they need to upgrade in both of those areas. They obviously added Saffold, kept Bates. And then you look at running back, they wanted to improve RB2. They wanted a pass catcher in there. And you get Duke Johnson, and they're obviously signaling they didn't have a ton of confidence behind Devin Singletary. So that's something that we will most likely see them address at some point. And if you're asking me my favorite target, it is Breece Hall, but you're going to have to get him in the top 40. And if you're getting a Jonathan Taylor, if you're getting a high-end level guy, good luck defending this team. Just good luck.
That's what I mean.
If you get a Breece Hall, he's probably your number one running back day one. You probably put Devin Singletary down to RB2 in that scenariio. So,
and you still have Duke Johnson, and you're trading Zach Moss for a little sugar. But like, think of it this way: he has 4,600 career scrimmage yards. He's a capable receiver. He is a guy you wouldn't take. He's a day one starter because you wouldn't take him off the field. Like, this isn't a scenario where you hope he develops. His athletic profile is there. His production's there. His ability to catch is there. Like, he's Nick Chubb. He's Jonathan Taylor. He can do it all. Like, add that to a new Roger Saffold, who's an upgrade at guard. Ryan Bates, who was an upgrade to Feliciano late in the year. The offensive line is instantly better there already with the few tweaks that they made. They kept Bates and they went with Saffold over, whether it's Butker, whether it's Feliciano, whatever, Darrell Williams. They made that addition. And I think the Bills' offense of line right now is pretty good. That's what they would tell you. Is it perfect? No. Is it great? No. Is it pretty good? Yeah, I think it's pretty good. And I think that you can nickel dime it. We can nickel dime it. And having too many interior offensive lines is never a bad thing. But I do believe that moving the line from upgrading Bates with an offensive lineman like Zion Johnson, I like that. I talked about that on the Hoof podcast earlier this week. I think that that's a decent move. But where could the real upgrade be made? And it's keeping Zach Moss inactive, and it's having Breece Hall as one of your premier backs, and still having Singletary to mix things up, and have Duke Johnson in certain situations too, if needed. This is an upgraded offense. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry. It just is
the
like
explosiveness you're adding is just, you have a guy that can take advantage of those lighter boxes. We all expect the run game to be improved this year with Saffold at left guard, with Bates being the primary starter at right guard. Now, if you have a running back in addition to that can take advantage of these light boxes, open holes, and open space, it's next level, just all around. And if you don't take our word for it, I can tell you, Eric, the founder of Cover One, he is all about Breece Hall. He loves his ability. He loves what he could bring to the Bills offense. And he's been clamoring, telling us all the time that this guy, if you can get him in the second round, he's going to change a lot with the Bills going forward. So if you don't take our word, believe me, take Eric's word, because this is a guy that's a game changer. I know we've all been instilled not to like running backs in the draft, but that's more of a first round thing when you have all that value in other positions that can really bring another dimension to the table. But when you're talking pick 40 and beyond, where you have a guy that is pretty much a guarantee he's going to be a good player versus someone that might be a good prospect, it's not a big risk to take running back in the second round. If the Bills think that this guy will take them to the next level, it's a perfect time to take him.
And let me read some final numbers for him. Outside of his height, which is for some reason like a 7 RAS instead of a 10, which is the top score. And we'll ask Kent about that next week. 9.95 overall, one of the best scores ever. Elite explosion in his 40 time, in his broad jump, in his vertical jump. 4.3940, good for 9.71 RAS score alone. He's got elite in the speed in general between his 20 and 10 yard split. It's that wiggle. It's the ability to hit and go that we are still missing on this roster. He does a lot And he is, quite frankly, the reason, to me at least, Iowa State was productive. Like, he is that good of a player. His measurables say it. His profile says it in pretty decent competition. Everything says it, and he's able to do everything. He might be as good as any of the backs were last year in the draft.
If he played somewhere other than Iowa State, we might be talking about him as a automatic first-round pick. Let's be real. When you play for the Cyclones, you don't really get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to football, especially the NFL draft. If he went to a Wisconsin or an Ohio State or somewhere else that's a bigger name school, he's getting more first round.
And they still finished 4th in the Big 12. Why? I think because of Breece Hall. They finished.
They're a good team. They are a good team in a good conference. It's just not a historical name program that you think about.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not gonna debate that too much. I'm not here to stan Iowa State, but I do believe that they were good, in a large part because of him. Brock Purdy's pretty good as well, but Breece Hall was 5.8 yards per carry. I mean, that's pretty nice to have, Mike, isn't it? That's Absolutely. Pretty nice to have on your team. All righty. We talked a lot about the offense, and I think it's because, at least I can't speak for Mike, I'm passionate about getting Josh Allen weapons. We're going to bring up more of these Raz profiles here next week. But to me, I feel really good about getting a corner at 25. And why focus a little bit more about weapons on day 2 is because I do believe that at this stage, it is creeping likely that the Bills might go corner in the first round. And then these names we've talked about today being very relevant. And that's why I'm talking about trading up, because you might need to throw an asset over to secure a Breece Hall after you've secured your cornerback that may have fallen in the first round. So I believe that's why, we spent a little bit more of a majority of the time today. Okay, but let's transition real quickly, Mike. Let's pretend like the Bills went Chris Olave again, and Chris Olave fell, or even Breece Hall, and they're like, we can't pass him up. We don't know that he's going to be there. He's that game changing. It doesn't really matter. And they need a corner. What are you thinking here as 57 approaches? Or you may, especially for corner, you may need to trade up if you go somewhere else in the first round. What do you think?
Yeah. When you're looking at corner in the second round, it really depends. Are the Bills going to be picking at 57, or are they going to be picking in a different spot in the second round? Because you have a lot of corners that could get to that early second round area, like a guy like Kaiir Elam from Florida. He's probably going to go early second round. He's a good press man coverage guy. Penalties were an issue last year. You have Roger McCreary out of Auburn, who is a very good player, but he's falling right now because he has the shortest arms out of any outside corner in basically the NFL right now. The guy just doesn't have the measurables right now, which probably takes him out of contention for being a serious pick for Brandon Beane and the Bills. The guy did everything right on the football field, but unfortunately, sometimes the measurables can drop you in the NFL draft, and he's a guy that really doesn't fit what the Bills would normally target. So good player, probably will fall. You've been hearing a lot of Kyler Gordon talk recently about could he be a first-round pick. I think there's some mixed opinions on him. Could he fall late in the second round? That might be pushing it. But he's a guy that was tremendous last year at Washington, didn't allow a touchdown the entire season. If you're getting more realistic guys that you're thinking 57 or somewhere in the third round, I'm thinking of Matt Emerson out of Mississippi State. Not the best athlete, but he has the length that you're looking for. A Cam Taylor-Britt out of Nebraska, a 3-year starter and captain. Honestly, probably should have been a better player in college, but had some issues, especially on double moves. You go beyond that. I'm not saying this guy is an early pick or not, but a lot of people are intrigued by Zion McCollum out of Sam Houston State. Great athlete, good speed. One of those guys played at a lower level, has some things on film that people are a little hesitant about, but obviously has the great athleticism. So I think you're looking at something like that in the second, third round area. Some of those guys. Another guy just off the top of my head, Tariq Woolen out of UTSA. Yep. And not sure where he exactly is going to go, but everybody's going to talk about how he converted from wide receiver to corner. Has the size at 6'4", the speed at 4.2, 640, and obviously the length. So if you're just looking at one person and the size, speed, length combination, Tariq Woolen would be near the top of your list. But obviously playing at UTSA and being a converted wide receiver, some people would probably be a little bit hesitant about it. But those are all guys that I'm intrigued by. Obviously, I said Roger McCreary probably won't be one of the guys the Bills target because of his measurables. But the rest of those guys, I think, are all possibilities day two if the Bills don't go corner in the first round, which I still think that's the direction they're going to go. So,
and I'm going to add one more for you, one more final name in Kobe Bryant. I think that he's a guy that adds a lot of versatility. He's a strong physical guy, adds those measurables similar to a Carlton Davis. I think he's a cornerback too, and I think that he's done a lot of good things in Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati. So to me, does add some of that profile that I'm looking for. Has pretty good hand size, good, that decent height. So I think that that's quite from 4.5, 440, like a little bit more 40 speed, but does a lot of things well. So Kobe Bryant is definitely somebody that from Cincinnati is definitely somebody that is into stay too special that could definitely be a target. And I picked him in the mock draft we just did on the Hoof again this week. So to me, Kobe Bryant is a guy that I'm targeting here as well, based on the profile. But Woolen definitely does fit the measurables. He is a guy that probably is in discussions if they do pass on the top flight guys. Woolen, Bryant, those are some of the names that you're looking at here, deep into second round. I mean, you got to look deep into the second round here at this point. But I do think they monitor for a faller if they go a different direction, and absolutely the trade up at the cornerback spot. It's not running back anymore, guys. If they see a faller at the cornerback room, I think that they wouldn't even think twice about trading the asset to go to secure a starting corner. I don't think that there's any discussion whether they get nickel and dimed out of a fourth round pick. I just don't think they care. So, as much as that would kill our Saturday coverage and not having an early day 3 pick, it's not going to affect the Bills at all to be able to secure a corner that they weren't able to secure in the first round due to other needs or due to adding weapons for Josh Allen. In this scenario for the day 2 special, I think that they would definitely trade up if they think that they can secure a starter. Mike, do you agree, or do you think?
I'm kind of with you on that. I feel so strongly that they're going to get a corner in round 1 that I'm not really as worried about these second, third round corners. If you're asking me today at this point,
you're going Booth.
13 days out from the draft, I'm thinking it's Booth. I saw a mock draft from Mel Kiper today that actually had Dax Hill at 25. I think that type of direction at 25 to me makes the most sense. I love some of these higher end wide receivers, and someone asked earlier, who's your no matter what guy? I've said it. It's Jameson Williams. That's the one guy I would sell my soul for. If he's available at 25, I'd say take Jameson Williams. I don't care who else is on the board. Take Jameson Williams. Just don't feel like that's a realistic option as we get closer to the draft in 13 days. At this point, I'm getting more reserved to I'll take an Andrew Booth. I'll take a Dax Hill. I'll take someone that is a first-round corner.
Yeah.
I feel like that sets it up for pick 57 where you can go running back or you can go wide receiver, whatever the Bills feel like is the more pressing need, depending on who's available. So if you get to 57, Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker off the board, well, maybe you can get a George Pickens or go a different route like that. If you get the running back round 2, you can maybe look at a Kelvin Austin in the 3rd round. There's a lot of different directions, but the one thing I'm most confident is, at least at this point, is I feel like it's going to be cornerback first round, and that'll open up a lot of different routes that they can take later on. And I do want to mention some other players that have caught my eye and that I've heard talked about as well. So obviously we're focusing the show on wide receiver, corner, running back, but the Bills have had some visits with an Oklahoma trio. Nick Benito, one of the most productive edge rushers in college football. Brian Asamoah, undersized linebacker, but dude is great from sideline to sideline. Perian Winfrey, most likely a 3-tech defensive lineman. And a couple guys that have caught my eye. Obviously, I mentioned Isaiah Likely. Travis Jones, UConn D lineman. Dude is ferocious. Could be a guy that could drop to you at 57. Trey McBride, A lot of people consider him one of the top pass catching tight ends in this class out of Colorado State, had over 1,000 yards last year. And there's some linemen. I still think offensive guard is not out of the question. I think the Bills could target linebacker or guard in the second or third round. It's not one of those sexy positions that catches our eye like wide receiver
Dylan Parham.
Corner. But if you're looking at a lineman, maybe a Cole Strange out of Chattanooga, who played very well in the Senior Bowl, a Dylan Parham, a Tyler Smith out of Tulsa. There's some guys there that they intrigue me. Obviously, we like the running back, wide receiver, corner, 1, 2, 3 in whatever order. But those are some other guys that are catching my eye as well that I think could be decent options depending on how you want to go about it.
Yeah, I think it comes down for me personally as I'm looking to secure a Super Bowl roster. How much does that guard, the difference between Bates and that guard, or Saffold next year and that guard, influence your decision high in the draft? Now, as you get to the 3rd and 4th and 5th rounds and they like a player, no doubt about it. Absolutely. Add the depth, add a controllable asset. No discussion. But the 1st and the 2nd, to me, in the top 57, at how much, at the cost of that pick, is it worth that slight, if at all, upgrade? And is it worth that controllable asset for if and when Saffold leaves? I don't know. That's the decision Brandon Beane needs to make on the roster right now. That's the decision he needs to make. I don't tend to think so. I tend to sink assets into players that can help you win a championship today. And I believe that they agree spending 9 figures on a pass rusher in his 30s. They want to win today. And as much as we're in the mindset, and many people are like in the mindset of how do we get as many, controllable assets as we can, controllable contracts, 4-year deals, whatever. Well, first of all, you're throwing one of them away if you're playing a guy that's behind a starter. So now it's a 3-year controllable asset. So now you're already losing a little bit of that benefit. So I think that the Bills are looking to play like we thought all along that the tackle position specifically, they were drafting a swing tackle. Spencer Brown started, right? He started, he was their right tackle. The Bills are looking for assets to start. This is the roster. This isn't the roster of the Giants. This isn't the roster of the Jets. The Bills are looking for players that can immediately impact the roster. Those players also are controllable assets for long term. That's not just a guy you have for a year. These guys that you're drafting, Jameson Williams, Breece Hall, Isaiah Likely, a couple of the other names that we brought up here today. Those are guys that aren't just going to play for you this year, like Saffold is. Those are guys that are here forever. So you get that controllable asset. The receiver is the most expensive position in the sport, as we've already talked about. So that's really important. So that's why get Josh Allen weapons. Receiver can change in a heartbeat, and injury can happen there. And that is such an important position. So, the guard room, if you're getting into that, I do like some names. Zion Johnson, really good name. I do think he could come and start over Bates day one. Now you have a controllable asset in him, and then you have Bates kind of a swing everywhere. So that's fine. You're paying him, 2.6 this year after the reduction in his base. And then you're paying him, 4.3 in future years. So then you would expect Bates to then take over for Saffold that leaves. So that's probable that could, something like that could happen if a guy like Zion falls and they really think that Cromer says this is going to increase our offense day one. Okay, that's quite a possibility. I do like Parham a lot. I think that he could bring a lot. I like Strange a lot too, from Chattanooga. I think his athletic profile is great for Cromer. So when it comes to the O-line, and this is why they matched Bates, they're looking for Raz guys. They're looking for, even more so than any other room, they're looking for that athletic profile because that's what Cromer wants to mold. So I would be like Tommy Doyle, for instance. I would be shocked if the Bills took a slow-footed guy that might have some production, but that's not the offensive lineman that they'd be looking for here for Buffalo with Cromer. So I believe Strange fits the mold. I think Zion Johnson fits the mold. I think Parham fits the mold. I think at any point those guys could be an upgrade, and even more so as you go a little bit down in the draft and Strange is still sitting there in the 3rd round. I think that's a good draft pick. So that's kind of my opinion on offensive line. Defensive line, I don't think they need to do anything with. I've researched them. I've seen tape. They've sunk a lot of draftable assets in that room. They have some veterans now in Shaq and Jordan Phillips, as well as Von Miller. I just don't think they have 3 controllable defensive ends still that are young. Boogie Basham, Greg Rousseau. AJ Epinesa, I just don't see it. They've signed a settle. I just don't see it necessarily there from the defensive tackle position to sink an asset in someone that's not going to play for a championship roster. And maybe some of those guys are signed longer term. A guy that might not play much at all unless you have an injury and might not see the field for 2 or 3 years. I just don't see defensive line, especially in the day 2 special, Mike. I just don't see defensive line here. Linebacker is interesting because that means you probably move on from Edmonds. So, that one's tough to just sit here and predict they're going to trade their middle linebacker. So, maybe we could address that, day of the draft or beyond the draft. I just don't see linebacker. The interesting one to me is still going safety. Like, that's really interesting to me. And that's kind of how Daxton Hill, we've seen him come up now. Mike, you brought him up. Where does he play though? Like, you have 2 all-pro safeties. You have a nickel corner which is also what he can play, and a really pretty good one. You're just drafting a guy who's pretty talented.
Matches versatility is what his plus
but
is.
Where does he play? Where does he play?
Well, with the way the current safety situation is with Poyer and Hyde, it's hard to see him really getting much time at safety as a rookie. You probably start him at corner, but then you got some obviously issues if you let Poyer walk. Maybe, I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's one of those things where you kind of just make the pick and then you see how he fits in best with your team. But that's a little bit risky. I would probably prefer to go Booth in that situation, but there are some rumblings right now that Booth is dropping on some boards. There's some talk he could be a late first rounder, and it sounds like it's more likely than not now that Booth will be on the board at 25 unless something changes in the next week or two. We know how NFL draft talk changes day to day, so who knows if that'll stick. But I'm thinking personally, if it's my pick, Andrew Booth is the guy I'm going with at this point in time. Dax Hill is an intriguing prospect, but
good prospect.
I feel like you're getting a solid thing in Booth. He comes from a solid program. He's been a good player in the ACC. He's played at the highest level of college football. He's just the guy that makes the most sense for me at this point in time if he's available at 25, which I'm starting to believe is going to be more likely as time passes.
And it's that minor injury. He's supposed to be ready for camp. The Bills are probably fist pumped, just like we get the clip all the time about. I hope Gabe Davis runs slow because the Bills want to take it.
I mean, if you're sold on a guy, who cares about a small little injury? I mean, as long as you have faith that it's nothing serious, let him have that small injury, fall to 25, and then be thankful when you have a chance to put him on the field.
The best rehab facility in the sport, including it's up there with Alabama's, so we've heard in terms of the rehab facilities. Like, it's one of the best in the entire world, really, for this sport. And quite frankly, is one of the factors in the Bills wanting to build their stadium there. Why would they want to remove that nice facility from this? They want it right there. So I think that that's part of knowing they're believing in their medical staff, which is one of the best in the NFL. Quite frankly, they don't have injuries, and they've lost the least amount of games in the McDermott tenure. So, we're gonna trust this medical staff, and I think you can. And then you have the facility in general to rehab him, and it's a minor injury, like it's minor. We're not talking about a major thing. He just had some cleanup on a sport groin injury, right? I believe that's what he needed as per I think it was Rappaport or Schefter or somebody had that news earlier here this offseason. But he's a guy that can be a corner one and mixed with another corner one in Trey White when he's healthy. That's quite the duo. So to me, Booth's the guy. I think he's the biggest path to the roster. I think the Bills were said to be in on Stefan Gilmore as one of the finalists here before he signed with Indy on a pretty big deal, actually.
I think it was 2 years, $23 million. Yeah, I never thought that was actually going to happen. The earliest report,
I didn't think he'd get that contract.
I mean, the Bills were never going to pay him that type of money, and the early reports were very vague too. It almost was more so saying, well, the Bills could be a wild card in the Gilmore sweepstakes, but nothing that really ever connected them to being serious as in making an offer and actually trying to court him to come to Buffalo. I guess there was always a possibility, but I don't know. I never really thought that was something that was going to happen. Just to answer a quick question about Tyler Smith. Is he a guard or tackle? He played left tackle at Tulsa, but he projects as a guard at the next level in the NFL. But
Could have some
Yeah,
versatility.
I mean, we've been saying this for weeks. We know they're going to get a corner eventually. It's just how do they go about doing it? What traits do they want? What is the most attractive thing to them? And everybody's going to have an opinion. But as I said earlier, Booth is my guy. But look out for a Joe Hayden, somebody like that. I still think there's a strong possibility you could get a guy like Hayden in as a veteran option, short-term, 1-year deal, $4 or $5 million, and still have enough money left over for your draft picks. So that's the way I would do it. But if you're a guy like Hayden, no rush to sign right now. You got the whole offseason. There's really no point to make a quick decision here.
I think he probably not a quick decision, but wants to be in at OTAs because like the way he's going to rebuild, but the way he's going to maybe see a final contract would be learning the defense and coming in and being a corner 2 from day one. It probably does behoove him to pick not tomorrow, but fairly by the end of April. I would think he would want to have his roster spot.
Fair. Yeah.
And I would think he's waiting for 2 weeks from now and then saying, okay, the Bills didn't address it in the first or second round. I'm going to go there. Like that's my best chance because now I'm competing with a Cam Taylor Brett rather than a Booth or rather than some of the other names we came up with here today. So I think that's quite frankly a possibility. And the Bills might only and it's been said after Gilmore signed that there's a couple of guys that have contracts they're waiting to sign. So that's what I read here today. So it's very possible the Bills after Gilmore's gone, they have probably one of the most attractive positions left. And I think that match between one of the most attractive positions in a team-friendly defense and the best available corner, those two will probably marry, Mike. I do believe that the Bills probably now, after Gilmore signed, they can kind of reevaluate and give whatever their offer is to the best remaining corner free agent. And the corner free agent has a lot of benefit to taking that deal.
If you're one of the best corner free agents available at this point, you're a veteran, you got some years behind you. At this point, you're asking yourself, well, am I going to get top level money from anybody? If the answer to that is no, your decision basically comes down to where do I want to play? Do I want to play somewhere based on a setting? Like, do I want to play somewhere warm versus somewhere cold? Do I want to play on a winner versus a loser? If all things are equal, you're probably going to go to the team that has the best chance at winning. So you figure the Bills are going to be high up on some of these players' lists, especially if they know they can come into a situation, be a starting corner, and have a chance to win a Super Bowl. That normally would be a pretty good tiebreaker when you're the team that has arguably one of the best rosters in the NFL. And the one position you're needing is one where you're targeting a corner and he's trying to decide, do I want to go to the 12-5 hypothetically Bills, or do I want to go to a 7-10 Miami team? Not saying Miami's going to go 7-10, but just hypothetically when making that decision.
Yeah, and the best remaining, so to kind of wrap it up here at Corner Room, Stefan Gilmore signs. We just talked about it. Steven Nelson signs. And then so who do you have left? You have left Bryce Callahan. You have Kevin King, Joe Hayden, Xavier Rhodes, Jack Rabbit Jenkins, Kyle Fuller, Chris Harris. So there's a couple names there that, even Richard Sherman's there if you deem this, he still has some stuff left in the tank. So there is some names there that the Bills can kind of now, I do think that they have the most attractive spot. They can kind of pick which one of those to kind of plug in. And it is an attractive spot because, is Trey White ready day one? So even if the Bills do address the corner room, you still have a path to playing a lot. You're competing against Dane Jackson. I would hope that as a competitor, you're thinking of that if you're Joe Hayden and you're like, I'm probably better than Dane Jackson today. So, the Bills, you have to come and prove it. But I think that that's kind of what you're saying. So I think that there's plenty of names there that you can go ahead and get it done. So lots of good free agents, Mike. I think that definitely going to be a topic of conversation as the draft goes on. And let's say they're not addressing. Let's say the Bills are just like, we're Josh Allen weapon, O-line, Josh Allen weapon, O-line, whatever. And they don't dress corner. We're probably going to be hitting this a little bit harder in 2 weeks, right?
Absolutely. You better believe it.
Yeah, and Xavier Rhodes re-signed with Indy. I didn't see that. They signed Gilmore, and I don't think they signed. I have him as a free agent here on my list, so I guess that's possible, unless that's just kind of maybe he re-signed. So I still have Xavier Rhodes as a free agent. So would be a nice player. I've liked him at times in his career. So unless he did re-sign, I don't have that anywhere. Still a free agent on everywhere I see, but Could happen. We're kind of late in free agency. Could it be like an agreement in principle or something there for him? So Mike, give us a final note or nugget here. We're wrapping up. We appreciate it. Smash the like button. Like us on Facebook. We appreciate everybody tuning in on a Friday. We're kind of get this day going here, and I appreciate all of the loyal listeners here. Mike, give us a final recap of day 2. You've listed off your names. What's going to happen? You think they go corner round 1. I think you've said that now.
Yeah.
What are you thinking then follows?
Yeah. So they go corner round 1. Hypothetically, they get Andrew Booth, like I've been saying for the last couple of weeks. What I think happens round 2, they're going to get a running back. It's going to most likely be, in my opinion, Kenneth Walker III. I don't think they're going to end up trading up to get a Breece Hall. Would love Breece Hall, just don't see it happening. I don't think there's a chance he falls to 57. Would love to be wrong. I'd say Walker goes to them at 57, and then in the 3rd round, you're looking at really anything. You could be looking top wide receiver available, top guard. You could even go linebacker, and maybe one of the top tight ends that's available. But I think 3rd round, most likely looking at best wide receiver or lineman left on the board. If one of your guards that you like, maybe like a Cole Strange, falls to them. So I'm thinking corner round 1, running back round 2, and then best available among wide out, lineman, wide receiver round 3.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I'm not far away from that. I also agree that they go corner round 1. I still am team give Josh weapons, but then once they get that corner, I think the defense is set. I really do. I don't think they need to touch that anywhere. I think they can fill anything out with veterans. They can call up Joe Hayden. They can do whatever they need to do. Make a trade if they need to. Everything. I'm talking like 2 through 5 offense. Like I'm talking 2 through 5. I'm talking the receivers we went through today. I like a lot. So I'm going receiver in round 2 because I don't believe that they can get the running back if they do pass in round 1. And like you said, if they don't trade up, I do think they could all, not just Breece Hall. I think that a couple of those names could be gone. And at what point do they deem Spiller to be the right pick? He could be someone they target in the 3rd round. But I do like corner round 1. I like receiver round 2, and then I like I'm still on the tight end in round 3. I really think it's possible. I think that's the first point. They're like, we took Docs. It took a little while, but worked out. We have a backup plan for this season. We have a backup plan for next season. And a guy like Likely, they like him a lot. No pun intended. So I think that the 3rd round is a good spot that they go tight end. And if he's gone or they don't have a guy there, I think that's when you could see Strange or an interior offensive lineman, whoever's on the board there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm thinking O-line tight end round 3, receiver / weapon round 2. And then if they get antsy in round 2, Mike, I'm still not counting out a move for Breece Hall. I still think that 4th round pick is not valuable enough for them to say, ooh, I don't want the best running back in this draft. I really don't. I really don't believe that this roster wouldn't want to put the best running back on it after they take a corner.
Yeah, if there's a way that they can package the 4th round pick and maneuver around, I would be totally in favor of getting earlier in the 2nd round and going after Breece Hall. If the Bills somehow got an Andrew Booth and a Breece Hall, I wouldn't even care the rest of the draft how it played out. I would call it a home run right there. You'd solidify your defense with a starting caliber corner, and you'd have the best running back in the entire draft. So yeah, that I would love that. I just don't know. It's hard to predict trades and project stuff like that. The whole draft is a crapshoot. We all pretend like we know what we're talking about, but the truth of it is, it's all just guessing. Once you get past the top 5 picks, it can go a million different ways.
It could happen. Like we're all sitting here dogging it, and what ended up happening is they trade up in the 1st round and trade all their picks for one player. Like I mean
the reason why we talk about it is it's just fun speculation. Like I go on Twitter, I go on social media, and people will be like, "Oh, you got this wrong." It's like, you know what? Honestly, this is just a good football discussion. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be doing this. And I'm addicted to football too much to not be talking this sport every month of the year. So obviously we mentioned the way we see things going, but there's a million different ways that it actually will play out. So
yeah, lots to like, Mike, lots to talk about, lots to go over. And we'll be back at you next Friday with Kent for the first half, and then Mike and I recapping and kind of going through our final decisions, and then followed by 2 weeks from today, the NFL draft day 2 will actually be going on. So it won't be the day 2 special. It'll be day 2 going on. We'll be all part of the live coverage here at Cover One. We have some great stuff going on Thursday. I'll be a part of pretty much the live coverage all day Friday. So day 2 will be, the Going Deep podcast will be a main player here for the Friday day 2. So stay tuned with us from 2 weeks from today to actually talk about live draft reactions and players that we'll be talking about, as well as the whole Cover One team covering day 1. Obviously a pretty big day there as well for anybody looking to follow along there. So hit, kind of check those notifications there for day 1 review, 2 weeks from yesterday, and then us and others here tracking day 2, as well as Eric, Aaron, and Greg, I believe, in Vegas. So we're going to have some live reactions, some coverage. We were credentialed there too. So definitely going to bring you some live content and hopefully be able to bring some live stuff from the floor there, and maybe interviews, whatever they're able to grab while they're there with potential Bills players if they're there. So lots to look forward to on Cover One here. Please smash the like button. Please like us on Facebook. It means a lot to us. Comment for anyone listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We appreciate you guys as well as our podcast listeners, and we really appreciate helping us continue to grow this Friday niche. But from the Going Deep podcast, I'm Kevin, that's Mike, and we're looking forward to bringing you some great coverage here in April.